Hey, and welcome to this week's Vortexrebirth show, where we talk about intuition and specifically why rationalists don't really believe in it. Intuition has been a subject that I'm fascinated by ever since I was a little kid because of things that I experienced. And I can tell you that intuition is a superpower that everyone has access to, but we are trained out of it. And as an individual, I've always sort of felt like a little bit of an oddball because, you know, I'm working with business owners and investors all the time. They're very rational people, and I'm working with them, building out their businesses. I'm working on a strategic level with them. It's something I really love and I really enjoy doing. I love strategy. But at the same time, and for those of you that have worked with me in the past, you know this, one of my superpowers is my intuitive ability, which enables me to see a person's patterns of behavior, their belief systems, and most specifically, the patterns of behavior, the belief systems that exist on a person's unconscious or subconscious levels that they're not seeing, but it's controlling their behavior. So I'm kind of like a secret weapon for a lot of my clients. But in the sense of feeling like an oddball, here I am living in a rational world, something that I can easily navigate because I think developing intellect is important, critical thinking is important. And then I have this superpower of an intuition that I constantly work with and hone. But for the most part, people find it hard to believe until they experience it. And I think about this a lot. And I think that in the future, we'll see sciences really understanding intuition. So I sort of wanted to start with, why is it that rationalists disbelieve intuition? Well, the first reasons that rationalists disbelieve in intuition is they do not have the internal network to be intuitive. And give me a second to explain that. They were born with the internal network to be intuitive, but it was drummed out of them really quickly. So, as a baby, as a young child, when we're born, we have undeveloped rationality, obviously, and our early experiences are kind of dreamlike in some way. You can see this with a baby and how they sort of go into their dream world and then come out, and you see their eyes sort of focus and they're back into their own little dream world. But typically what happens as a young person, we're able to sort of feel everything around us. Now, feeling is a really important thing to understand when it comes to intuition. And again, we're heading into this question about, well, why do rationalists disbelieve intuition? I've said, well, they don't have the internal infrastructure to be intuitive, but as babies, they did. And I've also used the word feeling. And feeling is a word that is super important when it comes to being intuitive. And the word feeling is something that artists might use a lot. And artists probably have greater access to intuition than a rationalist. And there's potentially a brain science reason for that. An artist is tapped into mythology, into archetypal patterns. They're connected to their feelings, which they're expressing. You never hear a rationalist communicate in that way, because rationalists can't, because again, they don't have that infrastructure. So Richard Dawkins, the leading atheist rationalist, he just disses anything that he would consider to be of magical, childish forms of thinking. In fact, he angrily sneers at it. Sam Harris, another rationalist, again does a similar thing where he kind of sneers at anything that is considered magical, childish forms of thinking. So Dawkins and Sam Harris have highly developed intellects. And again, I'll come back to what I said before. They don't have the infrastructure to be intuitive because they've developed logic. And so anything that's considered spiritual, metaphysical, intuitive, they would consider to be, and I'm putting words in their mouth, I haven't heard them say this, actually Dawkins has said it, earlier stages of human development. You know, we go back and many years, early stage of human evolution, and the cows. Well, one night there's a lightning storm, and they wake up in the morning, and some of the cows are dead. You know, so from that day onwards, they pray to the sky gods, because they believe that the sky gods can kill cows. So rationalists usually think anything to do with metaphysics, spirituality, or intuition is just part of that magical thinking of early stage development. Don't you hate dinging? I turn all my notifications off. This is Google and everyone else trying to grab and hijack my prefrontal cortex and my limbic system. I turn them off, but they always find a way to get turned back on. Dinging with messages, people trying to grab my attention. New videos from YouTube trying to grab my attention, etc. Can't stand it. I'll be going back to turning those dings off after this. So they would snare at this. And then we go to Jung, Jung, who probably formed more of the artistic type of personality. Again, a highly developed rationality. And Jung had entire transformations and understandings that came from his intuitive level. So Jung had the infrastructure to be intuitive, where hardcore rationalists don't. Now, because I've worked with thousands of people, I've learned a thing or two, and I work with them deeply, very deeply. So typically, I'll go back to what I was talking about before, and I was talking about the baby. A baby, sort of in a half dreamlike state, born and deeply connected to whatever's swimming up from the unconscious. Not hardened rationality yet. Mum walks past and the baby can feel mum. Dad walks past and the baby can feel dad. At this point, the baby is connected on a feeling level. Then let's just imagine that mum is angry or upset, or the baby can hear mum and dad arguing. Well, the baby kind of learns, look, I don't want to feel. I don't want to feel. And what happens is they start to develop defense mechanisms. They start to withdraw their conscious awareness out of their body. And, you know, if you're struggling to understand what that means, we know that through the psychological sciences, as an example, that someone can have a traumatic experience, and then that traumatic experience gets compartmentalized, and it starts to, and repressed is, I think, the word they would use for it, and the person forgets that traumatic experience because that person's consciousness has no ability to deal with the emotional impact of that traumatic experience. So this is what people do gradually, right, through their childhood, is go from very feeling beings to withdrawing awareness from their bodies, because they learn, I don't want to feel because I'm experiencing horrible feelings, because I'm connected to these horrible and here's the word, energies, because once you're starting to be intuitive, or when you are dealing with feelings and are connected intuitively, then what happens is your feeling means that you're just feeling horrible feelings from others and from the environment. And so the baby starts to shut down. Let's take this to the next step, right? Again, you know, we're probably at a point in time, I'm not so sure about this with woke culture and what I see happening in the world with bureaucracies and just rubbish around what's happening, where we have the ability to develop higher levels of emotional intelligence now. Like my mother, I was working with a client today, and her mother, they didn't have the ability to understand themselves like we do today. It wasn't the prevalence of counsellors and psychologists or inner work. And so people felt ashamed about going and getting assistance back then, like there's something wrong with you, right? It's just bizarre because there's something wrong with everybody. If you want to look at it from that context, no one's perfect. So you've got a mum and dad, and your dad's really angry, right? And so you sort of learn, well, shit, I don't like being angry. You start to judge anger. So again, what will happen is you'll start to withdraw your energy away from your own anger. And, you know, let's just say you're a baby who cries a lot, but when you cry, your mum, she's not connected to her own grief, her own crying. So she's got no understanding of how to deal with her own crying. So she represses and suppresses her crying. So you learn, well, you know, there's no point about me crying about this. No one's understanding or relating to me. So again, what happens is people start divorcing themselves from their body, and so they don't have to feel these emotions that they don't have the ability to deal with. And also at the same time, then they start to shut off the intuition in regards to feeling what's happening around them. So they start to lose intuition. And also there's an element where intuition, and by the way, there are many forms of intuition, many forms of intuition. But regardless, to be intuitive, I'll come back to what I said earlier, you must have the ability to feel. So regardless of how you get intuitive information or input, you must develop what we call feeling awareness. And I'm talking about, again, why rationalists like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris, they struggle to believe in intuition, or they struggle to understand anything that's spiritual or metaphysical, so they don't have the infrastructure for it. So because they've developed rationalization, pulled awareness out of the body. Now, in this experience of, I said you have to develop feeling. So as a child, again, and to enter this, we start to lower our brain waves from beta down to alpha into theta. And this is sort of like the daydreaming mind, the mind that is not full of fact, it's not decisive. It sort of hangs around in the territory of myth, metaphor, archetype, story. And as a child, we're allowed to play in that. We're allowed